You're listening to the Very Refreshing Podcast with Dylan Hamer and Alek Jetzel. It's delicious. It's very refreshing.
Welcome to the very first Very Refreshing Podcast. My name's Dylan Hamer. This is my co-host, Alek Jetzel. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to create a podcast, I'd say for a while now, mainly because you and I just sit and talk for hours. And I don't know, I want to say it came up about a year ago that we were gonna we should do a podcast about movies or whatever. And I don't know, we just got around to doing it, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, we had bounced a couple ideas off of each other. Like we should do, we had some specific like topics that we were thinking. And then after a little bit, we said, yeah, but we talk about so many things, it would be kind of a disservice to just do movies. So we kind of broadened it out, and this is the first go at us with that broad spectrum of things that we want to talk about.
Yeah, and we have 12 episodes planned, and this is the very first one. Yeah. And what we're going to get into here is like us making movies together. And I personally, we had this originally slated for later in the season, but we thought it would be a good first episode just because it kind of goes over us meeting one another. And on top of that, it goes over like our backgrounds and kind of how we got into filmmaking. So, do you want to tell the story of when you and I first met?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were both working for a company at the time. This would have been, I think we both got hired on right at the end of 2019. And so there was a conference for this company in Orlando, and both of us were going for different reasons. Like you were on the media team, so you were going to help film and put together the presentation of this conference. And I was there just in a support capacity because I was working in customer support. And so I had been talking to a lot of the people that were going to be there. Right. So I don't remember if it was on like the first night or the second night, but either way, there was a group of the employees of this company. The conference attendees were up in like this ballroom, kind of having like a party. And then the employees said, let's just go hang out by the pool. So there was like 4 or 5 of us, and we just kind of started talking, and all of us around this little picnic table. And I mean, that's where we first got introduced to each other, even though we had been working there for a few months at that point. So, and, we talked about a bunch of different things, right? Like the Marvel Cinematic Universe was in full swing, right? Like, Endgame had just come out. Star Wars had just come out. I think The Last Jedi had just come out not The Last Jedi.
Rise of Skywalker.
Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
So we were kind of having the first of these kind of conversations about just a slew of different pop culture and goofy things.
So it was you, myself, our friend Connor, and what we originally talked about, like you said, we were talking about Marvel and Star Wars, but something I personally remember is we started talking about just creative endeavors in general. You seemed weirdly fascinated with my job. You were like, oh, how'd you get into that? You know, blah, blah, blah. And then you told me that you always had this dream of writing a movie, right? Yeah. And you told me a little bit about your brothers and things like that. And you were like, I want to write a superhero movie, right? And you were like, man, if I could, I would write a Fantastic Four movie.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where it started. And I remember you telling me that you were writing either a short story or you were beginning a book at the time. And this was about superheroes. Yeah. And a lot of it was based around like your brothers and things like that. And you wanted to send over like a draft, or at least like a portion of a draft that you had been working on, and you wanted me to read through it. Yeah. And that's kind of how we got started in all of this.
Yeah, and it was like very serendipitous too, because this was my first gig out of college. And I was finally, I had just gotten married to my wife like a month before that. We were going to alley-oop this Orlando trip into a honeymoon. Yeah. And so it was like I said, very serendipitous, because I was finally feeling like secure, and that I could finally, I'd spent all this college time trying to get a job, and now I could like actually think about creative stuff that I'd kind of stifled for so many years. So I was actually typing on the flight over on the little laptop that I had just bought. this, 3 or 4 chapters of, I didn't know if it was going to be a novel or a short story or a movie. I didn't know what it was, but I had this idea that I was marinating on. And you said, send it to me. I want to read it.
Yeah.
And that was, it was a little bit like shocking for me because I was like, oh man, someone wants to read my stuff, even though this is like the first few pages I've written, right?
Yeah.
So that was like really cool to me that you were so interested in it. That really, made an impact on me for sure.
Something that I also remember was, this is super corny, but I tell this story all the time. We came back from Orlando and, I took the weekend off and then came into work the following Monday, and you had written me this note, and it was on my desk and it was folded up and it said, "To Dylan." And I actually still have this note. It's in my room. It's on one of my shelves, and I occasionally pull it out and read it. I don't know if I've ever told you this.
Yeah.
But this note basically said like, "Hey, thank you for, sharing your creativity with me. And, it made me feel really good." And how, you just, I don't know, we had a really nice conversation, and it was you just saying thanks for that. And I don't know, we've just been friends ever since then, because I knew that I had a good talk with this guy, but like coming back, I was like, oh, he's a good dude. So we started hanging out, and we hang out a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause like, I think like maybe a month or 2 after we got back from that trip, the company expanded offices.
Yeah.
So we went to a different location where our offices, or at least the call center floor for customer support, was like literally a door, and then you were right there.
Yeah, you were like right outside my office.
So I would peek in there in between calls, and we'd have more of these conversations, right? Just about a whatever.
We had basically kicked around the idea of doing something creative with one another. But before getting into that, we talked a little bit about your writing, and you write a slew of things, not just at this point films, but you also write short stories. You have stuff that you're working on that you don't even know if it's going to go anywhere or become anything. How did you get your start in writing, and how, I don't know, like what, because fun fact, I'm going to spill the beans. When we worked together at this supplement company, you were answering phones, and then eventually you graduated onto a different role where you were being the communicator between the company and practitioners, because we dealt with a lot of doctors. But now you're actually writing for a living, right? And a two-part question. One, like, how did you get your start? And second part, when you stop to think about where you ended up, how does that make you feel? What's that all like? So where did you get your start, and how does it feel to sit now and realize that you're doing what you love for a living?
That's such a good question. I haven't really put it in that kind of perspective before, so I appreciate you bringing that up. But yeah, so I got into writing just whatever because I've always been a real big fan of speaking, right? And my dad, that's kind of like in my genes to be a presenter, right? And so when you want to be a presenter, you have to build what you're going to present on, right? And so that's kind of where that initial idea of writing came from, was I want to be able to get in front of people, so I have to write the proper thing to be able to be worth it to get in front of people, right? And I liked writing in my different classes in high school and stuff, and then in college, there's that joke that like they don't teach us anything worthwhile in high school. You know what I mean? And it wasn't until I got to college where I had someone really outline these facets of good writing, not for the sake of like a good grade, but for the sake of good writing, right? And so I learned a lot from a couple of different teachers who kind of pushed me to do certain things in writing. And I've kicked around the idea of different topics for a book, self-help book, those, because like I said, the initial jumping off point was to be a speaker, right? So I always thought I would write this kind of self-help book and be some kind of motivational speaker. That was always the idea. But it eventually went into different areas. And so it is really, I'm really grateful, and really, it's really a cool idea that I'm writing, to bring home the bacon now. That's a really cool idea. Cause at the time when we were working at that company, I had like kind of a writer-ish role. And then when that job ended, when my time at that company ended, I was looking for a new job. And at a certain point I said, I'm going to start applying as a writer. And I built my resume to show off that I was a writer, right? Even though my experience was iffy as a writer, right? And I ended up lucking out and finding the spot where I can be writing for a living. And that's really cool. But now that I write for a living, the creative writing has become like way more of a hobby, right? Because, I write these technical details in my 9 to 5, and then I have this creative outlet where I get to write sometimes nonsense, but at least it's fun. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like for sure a hobby, right? Yeah. And back, the same question to you too, right? When we were working together, that was your first media job. Yeah. And you had grown up doing all these different kinds of media things. So, back at you, what's your process of getting into media, and how do you work in media now for a living? What does it feel like to look back and say, I'm here now?
So it's crazy. I think like most kids, you grow up, and if you have access to a video camera, you and your friends are going outside, you're filming, whether it be, I don't know, you make like an Indiana Jones fan film, or maybe you and your friends just saw the new Jackass movie and you guys want to go film stupid stunts, or I don't know, whatever the case is. But I grew up filming everything, and I was just in love with movies, like you. And my life took sort of a pivot for a while, and I was in a band, which we're going to talk about later, because both of us have that background as well. Yeah. But I was doing music, or pursuing music rather, and was working a corporate job that it brought me pride, but at the same time, like, it really ticked my mom off. And it's very strange because, most parents, when you get into a corporate gig and you spend a lot of time and move up the ladder, your parents are typically pretty proud of you. My mom was upset about that. Yeah. And she always told me, she's like, why are you wasting your life? Right. Because in 2016, I ended up quitting my band, and I was like, okay, I'm going to become a working stiff, and I'm just going to focus on my career because I'm having trouble delegating my time. And I just kind of put all creative endeavors on the back burner. I still did like musical stuff for fun, like vocal covers and guitar covers, and that required some, filming and editing.
Yeah. Because for most people, it's like flipped, right? They spend those like early 20s pursuing getting their groundwork for like their career. Mm-hmm. And then, especially in my case, and now that I feel a little bit more secure, I can do creative things. Yours was the opposite, right? You did creative things for a while, and then you were like, okay, time to actually, make some money and be more secure.
Well, that was it. I got sick of being broke. Oh, yeah. And, I was just dumping all of my money into music, all of my time into music. And, a big blessing that comes from that is a lot of the stuff that I do now for a living, I had to learn how to do efficiently, because when you're a band, it's either you're going to spend tons of money contracting out all of these things, or you're going to do them yourself. And I went out and I just wanted to learn how to do things. That way our band could get either artwork or recordings or video or photos or whatever we needed.
Yeah, I was going to ask what those things. Yeah.
So like all those skill sets were there. They were kind of an interest growing up, but more so when I was in my band, because I needed that to push our brand forward. And then I just got sick of being broke. I got sick of dumping money. There was like, I don't know, there was a lot of problems with my own ego, and I hated music towards the end of it. But back to what I was saying, my mom was very disappointed in me. And that sounds harsh, but she always asked me, she's like, why is my son wasting his life? And I'm like making good money at this company, and I have security, and I had a girlfriend and like all these things. And my mom still was not satisfied for her son, because she knew her son deep down in his core wanted something more for himself. And
do you think that just came from her like motherly attribute of just knowing her son super well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because now that it's been fulfilled, I totally understand what she wanted for me. Because in 2019, she passed. And we had a last conversation, and it was weird. She goes, do me a favor. If you ever get the opportunity to follow your dreams, please do it, because I want that for you more than anything. And the moment she passed, I went, my brother and I, took care of everything, and I came back and I put in my 2 weeks, right? It was just like that. And then I came and worked with you right then and there, because I'm like, you know what? Like, my mom saw something, and like, I want to honor this, and I want to go as far as I can go and just see what happens. And that was like 5 years ago, or
like 3 years ago.
No, it was 2019. So it was like 3.5, 4 years ago. Yeah. My time's off. But, I've been with multiple companies since then. And now, I'm just like, doing videos for a living. And a lot like yourself, it's kind of surreal to kind of see the version of yourself that you dreamt of, throughout your life being fully realized. And it's such a great feeling. And just like you, now that I am creative for work, however, those creative endeavors do go further on the side with filmmaking and things like that, right? Because my work is very corporate. I mean, you bring a degree of like some like cinematic aspects to marketing videos, commercials, TV spots, whatever you're doing, but like movies, right? So that in a nutshell is kind of like what we came together to do. And it was so strange because we built this strong friendship, and we sort of daydreamed, because like I was doing short films long ago, but I knew you were a writer. You knew that I was a director and a cinematographer, and we sort of just like bounced it around, just like this podcast. But then we went out and actually did it, right? So we had a little bit of a trial run, which we'll skip over. I want to get to Watch Me. And to not hog the conversation, what I want to know is bringing it back to you. Can you walk us through kind of the beginning stages, what Watch Me actually was and why we did it, and just walk us through the starting stages of making that short film?
Before we get too far into it, your background and your like one love is the horror genre.
Of course.
And that's not something that I have very much experience with, right?
Sure.
We'll talk about that in more detail in another episode. I grew up on a completely different genre, right? But what Watch Me is a short horror flick that we worked on, and what it comes from is here in the area that we live in the Treasure Valley area of Boise, Idaho. There's, I guess it's like a group. It's not a company, it's like a group, but they put on what's called the 48 challenges. They'll do one in the summer. They'll do one in the fall, I think. That's for music videos. And then, in like February for the music videos or something like that.
Fall is the horror, because you get into October.
Yep. So fall, October is the horror 48. And what a 48 challenge is teams sign up Friday evening. They're given basically a prompt, right? That includes a couple of different things, and they have to turn around a 5 or 6 minute video. In the case of horror, it's 6 minutes. In the case of horror 48, it's 6 minutes, and they have to submit it Sunday evening. So 48 hours to create a 6 minute horror short film, right? And the prompt, the packet that they gave us in the case of Watch Me this last year that we made it was a line of dialogue, a prop, and a subgenre of horror, right? So just to lay the stage, we got the subgenre of psychological horror.
Yeah.
Our prop, which everybody in the whole contest got, was this little blue Swiffer thing, right? That you like dust with.
Yeah.
And then the line of dialogue was, hold on, let me see if I can get it right off. I prefer pleasure and pain in equal parts, most days anyway, right? Yeah. So we have to fit the parameters of, we have to have those things in this 6 minute horror. Everything else is up to us.
And it's basically just like It's us proving that we did it in the allotted time and not prior, right?
Yeah.
So those prompts are there just to make sure that like you didn't cheat.
Yeah, because I mean, when we knew what we were gonna do, H48, when we were gonna do this challenge, we had a couple of nights where we stayed up and we're like, what if we get this genre? And we started brainstorming ideas beforehand.
Yeah.
And then when the day came and we got psychological horror, we're like, okay, well, we have to start from scratch now.
Yeah.
Because we didn't really have anything that fit into that. And we should say we had a third team member, Caleb, right? Who's your roommate, your friend from a long time.
Yeah.
And also a guy who has experience in filmmaking and helping out with that. So we were a small team, which we wanted to keep it that way because as Dylan mentioned, we had done a 48 before. We won't talk about that one. It's a little bit, it's not, this is kind of like our starting point.
Yeah.
Watch me. And we kind of realized a small team where everyone is doing different or multiple things, is at least the best environment for our team for success.
Well, we know that the three of us have a blast.
Yeah.
And the thing is like in filmmaking, I'll just come out and say it. People take it way too serious. And while it is serious business because you're making content or whatever, the reality of it is that it's supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
Why would I spend 48 hours sleep deprived, angry, depressed, stressed, nervous, and ultimately like maybe walking out of it with ruined friendships?
Yeah, feeling resentment for your friends afterwards.
It's so silly, right? But we know that we can we can go like to the edge of sleep deprivation. Yeah. We can shoot each other down in terms of ideas, and we respect one another, and it's going to be okay. And that was exactly the case.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And that each of us, while we have like specific roles that we figured we were going to fall into, if it called for something different, right? I could step back and say, okay, someone else, it's for the betterment of the project, right?
Always.
So like, even though in Watch Me, I ended up writing and acting in it, if there was someone better suited for the role, for the acting role, I was okay with stepping away.
Yeah.
And not having to be the actor, right? Yeah. And that was really cool. And that kind of even did happen with Caleb. And when we got to our location, we realized that there was someone there waiting for us that was going to do a great job, right? So, yeah, we were just stoked. And we said this a bunch. You said this a bunch to me, and I agreed. If we're not having fun, then
we'll call it.
Right?
Yeah,
because the most we can lose is the entry fee to the festival,
which is like I think like $50 or something. It's not a big deal,
right? And if we're putting together something that either we're not having fun with, or we don't like, or it deserves more attention than maybe this 48 hours, because maybe we're going to have a stroke of inspiration, then we bow out of the competition and we give it the attention it deserves, right? Yeah. Because we just wanted to make something cool, something fun, right?
Yeah.
So as we started brainstorming, me and you and Caleb, we had a bunch of different ideas, and we had a bunch of weird ideas, but we found kind of a formula that seems to be the way to go. And it is, well, let's pick one location, and then let's go find that location, and then let's build a story around this singular location.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. You basically, I don't know. It like goes into our newest work, which we'll cover in the very next episode. But I don't know, ordinary things happening in weird spots is like kind of unsettling. Yeah. You know? Yeah. It's like if you had like an espionage film in a grocery store. Yeah. It's weird.
Yeah.
But maybe we should do that.
In a grocery store. Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Okay. I'll write it down.
All right. He'll write it. You'll write it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, like, and that does a couple of things, right? Especially for a 48, we can film in one location. It takes the logistics of it down by so much, and it helps in the writing process because this is only a 6-minute film anyway. Right. So trying to do multiple locations and a bunch of different characters is just a recipe for, we have this convoluted story that can't be shrunk down into the prescribed time, right? Yeah. So we ended up, like you said, thinking, what's just a strange place that a horror film can take place in?
And it's so unoriginal in terms of location, but
Yeah, we decided that we wanted to film a horror short in like a dumpy, rundown motel,
which
has been done
a billion times before. But we knew that we're like, oh, that's a spot we could probably secure.
Yeah,
because again, the time is the clock is counting against you the whole time, right? So it's like we need location booked now, and then we have to go shoot first thing in the morning, right? Yeah. So we also, like I said, even though it wasn't like a unique concept, it was unique to us and unique to maybe this festival. You know, we thought there probably won't be another team that goes to the Colonial Motel, which is the spot in Weiser, Idaho, which is the spot that we ended up securing. Yeah. You know, we're not going to see another team driving by us to film, right? No.
And it's going to be at least unique to us and unique to figuring out what's going to happen in the story, right?
Yeah.
So like you said, we were up pretty late calling different motels within an hour of us, you know? And I remember you had even mentioned, you're like, there's the perfect motel on this little spot on the border of California. Do you remember this?
Yeah, it's border of California and Nevada.
Yeah.
And this came out of pure desperation. Yeah. I was like, we have to do this because we had an idea that we really liked. Yeah. And it was like, I was crazy. I'm like, I'll drive us to California right now. Yeah. We'll go to California. We'll edit at the hotel and then we'll drive back. Like we can submit, we're going to submit the film over a network anyway.
All we need is the Wi-Fi.
We just need the Wi-Fi and we'll just come back super late Sunday night or Monday morning. But either way, we do all the work in the motel. And I actually called them and the dude was cool with it.
Because that's what we were running into. We called all these different places and they're like, I'm not sure about that. And we're like, hey, we'll pay for the room for a night, you know? But we had a bunch of people saying we're not really into that.
Well, I think a lot of them thought we were like doing some sort of adult film or something. Yeah. It's like, hey, we need to film in your motel room probably at night. And they're like, oh, that's where naughty things go down, right? So
yeah.
And luckily we found one.
Yeah, we ended up finding, like I said, the Colonial Motel in Weiser, Idaho, which is about an hour from here. Mm-hmm. About an hour like heading towards Oregon.
Sure.
And we ended up, I think we that was like on our short, I think Friday night, we still didn't have it nailed down for sure, but we had the short list and we ended up calling, her name is Danny, the manager of this hotel, Saturday morning. And we finally like booked it. And we're like, okay, cool. We're going to be out there at about 1 or 2 in the afternoon. Saturday morning, we were driving around trying to find props and all the stuff that we needed. It's a horror movie, so we were over at the Spirit Halloween store that had moved into like a gold. What I don't know what the store was.
It was like, I think it was where Toys R Us used to be. It was Toys R Us.
Yeah. So we had gone to the Spirit Halloween. We had our prop knife. We had all of our fake blood. We had gone to Walmart and we had bought shower curtains and bed sheets so that we could bloody up our own stuff without having to destroy the linens of this motel. Yeah. So we had driven around. We had a prop that we needed very desperately for this to work, which is like an old school like shoulder carrying camera.
It's just like a VHS. Yeah, it's like a VHS like family camcorder.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we had been going around to all of the thrift stores. We were looking on Facebook Marketplace to anybody that would have had something like that. And is that where we ended up finding it?
There was one on Facebook Marketplace and it was an older lady and, you know, she wasn't getting back to us promptly. Of course not. Yeah. But we like low key kind of stalked her. Yeah. And I know this sounds crazy, but like this is how devoted we were to the idea. It's like we went to her Facebook. We found out that she was a real estate agent. We found one of her listings. We drove to that listing and we met her daughter or something. And then her daughter was like, no, but let me call her. And then we went to this lady's house and she was freaking awesome. Yeah. She was the coolest. Yeah. A little weird, but like in the best way.
Yeah. Well, in the way that like older ladies and older people in general, when they get a hold of a young person, they don't let go. They just want to chat their ear off.
Yeah,
right?
But like all of her stories were like interesting and disturbing.
Yeah, because we told her we're making a horror movie.
She's like, someone died over here.
So she started spilling tea on like all of the weird things in her neighborhood about like domestic abuse and murders and stuff. It was so wild.
She's like, yeah, in 1982, Sylvia over here was killed by her husband.
Yeah.
And then like her husband had passed and he had a huge like camera collection. And what's really cool about that is like not only did we get the camcorder we needed, but she gave me all these books that were like how to be a cinematographer. And these books were written in the 60s and 70s, right? So like I have like 10 books now that is just like how to make films basically, but they're from, you know, those 2 decades. So it was really fascinating. Yeah. And coolest lady ever, was not even remotely put off by the fact that we hunted her down. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And then we had our location, we had our props, we had our premise, and we were off to the races. Yeah. And we got to Weezer at like noon or something.
I think even later than that. I think our plan was to get there like noon or 1. Yeah. And we ended up getting there at like 2 or maybe even 3 in the afternoon. Oh,
that's right. That's right. Yeah. And then we wrapped at like 1 a.m. or something, you know, and then we had to drive back. And then it's like, you got to think. So we have less than 24 hours now to edit a film. But we had an absolute blast filming it.
Totally.
I think.
Yeah.
Even like we had Uncrustables on deck. Yeah. You know, we were eating like Uncrustables. We had snacks. We were laughing. We were singing Goofy movie soundtrack, like super loud.
Yeah.
And that
because it was just the 3 of us.
Yeah.
So absolutely. We had full, like you said, 3 of us that aren't taking it too seriously.
Yeah.
So like we have the reign to just goof around, which is the best.
It's kind of weird in contrast because we had the best time. We were giggling. And we put in equal amounts of work, right?
Oh, totally.
But we made a really cool short.
Oh yeah.
And you know, back to Danny, you mentioned earlier, she was in the film. The manager was in our film. I was like, hey, you want to be a star? And she's like, yeah, I do. And then
because essentially it's, you know, my character goes to the motel and checks in. Yep. And then after I check in, I'm alone. But we originally had Caleb being the hotel manager that would check me in. But when we met Danny face to face, we're like, she would be perfect just playing who she is.
And she was.
It was the best.
Not to take away from you, I think the majority of the compliments I've gotten about the short is her. Everyone's like, she's like really authentic. I'm like, that's because she's a real, that's her hotel, you know? So, but we had an absolute blast. You know, we maxed ourselves out, but we loved it. We came back, we edited the short, we submitted it. Yeah. And then,
and you know, and like even though we filmed into the dead of night, it was still like a pretty good. I didn't feel like we were crunched for editing time. Maybe you did because you were actually editing it, but we at least got to go home, get a full night's rest, and then go start editing.
Like I went to bed and I think I came back in at like 9.
Okay.
9 a.m. And then I had until
7 in the evening or something.
I think it's like 6 or 7. So yeah, I gave myself a little bit of time, and it came together fairly quickly.
Totally.
You know, and I don't know, I don't know if you experienced this. We've talked about this with Man in the Hat, but something I want to know from your perspective is, so when I make short films, and it's always been this way, I get so lost in the weeds, as in I sort of lose, is this quality? Is it good? Is it bad? Blah, blah, blah. And it drives me nuts. And I get like anxious and I get scared. I'm like, do I want to submit this? I want to quit. It's nuts. Right. So how did you feel exiting the editing process when we all came together and we watched it? I was probably not the most pleasant person to be around, just because I was like, I don't know, guys, like, I don't know what we have here, you know, but like you and Caleb, watched it as well. So, you know, the final edit, like from that to the festival and the screening, the premiere of it. How did you feel coming out of that?
I felt awesome, honestly. And the reason being is, I was really grateful to be included. Because you've done a couple of them in the past and you've had success with some of them, but this is the first one that I really got to be like a full-fledged member of the team. Yeah. And not only a member of the team, but writing it and, for lack of the lead actor in it, right?
That's right.
And that's not
You're a star, baby.
that's not as impressive as it sounds, because it, like I said, is a 6-minute film and there's only 2 people in it, right? So, but I was just so stoked and grateful that you and Caleb, who are established and who have done this stuff before, let me be a part of it, as inexperienced as I am. Sure. And so I think I had that more 10,000 foot view of it, where everything was glamorous to me, because I was so stoked to be included. And so, while you were editing it and I was watching it come together, and I'm sure we'll put the link to it in this video, but we kind of filmed it twice. And when you watch it, you'll realize why we did that. We filmed it twice. When you were sequencing it and putting it together, I was sitting right behind you when you were editing it, and so was Caleb. And so to see you put everything in order from how we had filmed it twice just made me go, oh my gosh, it's coming together. Oh my, I was just stoked, right? Yeah. Because even though I had done like some fun writing and some fun stuff, this was like the first one. I wasn't able to make it the year before to work on the H-48 with you guys. And so this was going to be the first time that I got to be like a full-fledged member of it. And I was so excited. And we haven't mentioned this yet, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in a second. All of the teams submit their video, their film, and then a week later, we go to the Egyptian Theater downtown and we get to watch all of them. So not only is it you submit it and then it's gone and they judge it, you get to go watch it in a theater.
And it's a festival.
Yeah,
it's festival, because like not only the teams come, but people from all around, not all around as in like, nationwide, but people from all around the Treasure Valley come, and they come to the theater, they watch these short films, and it's a blast, right? Yeah. And I don't know, I love the festivals because I like seeing other people's films. Hate being in a theater when people watch my films. Hate it. It's the worst. Yeah, it's like you overanalyze any sound that someone makes. If someone chuckles, you're like, wait, were they laughing out of nervousness? Were they laughing because this is a cringy moment? Like, what is this? Yeah. But I'm just going to say it, like, people liked it. Yeah. Right?
So I hadn't been to one of these before. Yeah. And you told me, like, unless it's a comedy, right?
Yeah.
Laughing is not great, and silence isn't great, right? You want something kind of in the middle, right? You want something where people are listening and reacting and you can hear some chitter chatter. And so, I think like I was like pitting out in my t-shirt, man. I was sweating, like my hands were kind of shaky because, I'm about to see my big goofy head on this screen, this big screen. That was the first time I experienced something like that. So I was pretty mad nervous about it. And yeah, people, how would you describe the feeling in the theater? So before I like turn it to you for that question, we made something that was pretty scary.
In the context of the festival, right? Because like, and this is no disrespect, but a lot of people that, because there's not a lot of horror that comes out of the Treasure Valley. There are people that do it pretty well, but like most of the time when teams go in, they default to wanting to be funny because, I know horror and comedy are very similar, but the thing is like people are afraid to like take a stab at it because it's like a drama in the sense that if you deliver something straight and deadpan, it could fall flat on its face. Yeah. Whereas like if you make an inappropriate joke, maybe like a couple people in the audience are going to giggle at it regardless. Yeah. So I'm not saying they're playing it safe, but I'm just saying like people that don't typically make horror films or invest their time into horror films, they kind of make, the horror comedy hybrid, which, those are valid. Those are horror films nonetheless. But I would go out on a limb and say that and this not an ego thing, but we made like just a straight horror film. Yeah. I mean, you can laugh at how just over the top gory it is, because it's super gory. Yeah. But the reality is like, I don't know. I had someone tell me at the premiere, they go, that was disturbing. And I was like, cool. Yeah. We did it. Yeah, that's good.
Because while we were watching it, like I said, I was barely even watching the screen. I was like listening for the reaction around me because you had told me that, right? You had told me these are the two things we don't really want.
Like silence is okay depending on your scene. Yeah. Like if people are silent on an exciting part, that's bad. Yeah. But if people are silent on a part that's like requiring a lot of attention, that's okay. Yeah. But like in horror, you know, when you have a climactic section, usually, you know, your second or third act, or even like the beginning, sometimes like you want people invested, but if they're quiet, you know that like maybe the tension surpassed them. It's like what Alfred Hitchcock said, right? It's like you have to give people a break from tension. If you ride the tension too long, people get bored, and boredom usually equals quietness, you know? I mean, people could chat amongst themselves or whatever, but usually when people are bored in a movie theater, they just sit there quietly. They're not phased, right? So,
and so we were watching it, and like I said, there's the part I check into my hotel room. I go to my hotel room by myself, and from there until the end, it was like dead silent. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And at first I went, this is bad. And then I went, wait a second. Every single eyeball, I could feel it, right? And it not an ego thing, sure, because
it's an excitement.
I'm excited about it, right? And I, you know, is Watch Me incredible? Is it the best ever? No. But I love it, right? And I'm super stoked about it. And
I've grown to love it.
Yeah, and I think we did a good job with it. So I could feel all the eyeballs on the screen, right? And then credits, you know, it's over, credits roll, and I lean to Carrie. I lean to my wife and I go, it was quiet in here. And that felt cool. It felt really cool. Yeah. Right. And yeah, people were pretty stoked about it.
I heard like, not necessarily gasps, but people were like leaning in and saying like, I don't know what they were saying, but you know, people were leaning in or like, whoa, or you know, whatever the case is. So like,
I think I heard someone go, what happens next? Yeah. And I was like, whoa. Yeah. That's like the coolest thing you can hear.
Yeah. It's like
nothing. Yeah.
It's over.
It's over now.
Forever.
Yeah.
But it was a cool experience, I think. You know, I don't do a lot of the 48s just because they're very exhausting, especially when you do it the way we did it. Which like I know other filmmakers that are watching this are going to just like not feel bad for me. They're going to say, well, you could have a crew, but it's like realistically, I hate that. I hate having a ton of people on set. I hate all the management. I hate the politics. I hate that people get caught up in the terminology. It's like when people are trying to tell someone, hey, this is how I want the Apple box set, or you know, like they're using correct terminology, but like there's a lot of like set hands and assistants and things like that, like PAs that are confused, and then people get mad, and it's just like, it's stupid. But if three friends go and we make a movie and we're giggling, you know, it's like, it's fine.
And it's funny because like that's like, and again, like, I just felt grateful for being included because of my lack of experience. I still got to be front and center and participate, you know?
Yeah, but because that's awesome though.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you said it yourself. You had like a bird's eye, 1,000-foot view or whatever you said. And the thing is like, when you do something for so long, it's like someone comes in and sort of revitalizes your excitement for it. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what you did. Is like you take something that's a little dreadful and then you bring someone in that's like stoked. Yeah. Like kind of like what Riff did. And we'll get into that later. Yeah. But it's like people revitalize with their energy and they're so excited, and it's like you're like, "Oh yeah, this is exciting."
Yeah, someone who vocalizes, not just is having fun, but says I'm having fun.
Yeah.
And then everyone can kind of look around and go, "We are having fun.
We're having a great time."
Yeah.
And I want to be clear, sets and crews and like a big team, it's necessary on certain projects, which
Totally.
we'll get into because we had to expand our team
Yep.
for another project.
Uh-huh.
But for something like this, it just isn't necessary. And I see some people do these 48-hour challenges because they're not exclusive to us. They're all over the country. In fact, all over the world. And people really go hard on their crews. Yeah. It's like, oh, I need a gaffer. It's like, why?
Do you remember after we were driving home, it was me and you and Caleb and Carrie was with us.
Yeah.
Do you remember to go how big crews get and how inexperienced I was? So what?
Oh, you want to bring this up? Are you sure?
Yeah, because I feel silly about it. So for context, credits roll on ours and it shows 4 names, right? It shows Dylan, Alek, Caleb, Danny,
Yeah.
right? On the other ones, they start doing a credit scroll and there's like 50 names on some of these, right? And
Maybe
they
not
talk
that many.
a ton, right?
But yeah, like 10 to 15 for sure.
A ton, right? At least relatively to our group,
Oh, absolutely.
Right? A ton.
People have their crews.
Yeah.
you know?
And to someone who hasn't done it before, I went, man, that just seems like too many people, right? And I think on the way home, what did I say?
So what happened was, it's funny. It's funny. Okay, listen. This is what happened.
Okay.
So I think we're getting loosey-goosey now, where we're going to get a little silly. But here's the thing. I said what I said back then, right? We were having a conversation in my car about how small our team was, right? And you said something along the lines of, well, it's really cool that we did this with just us 3. And I was like, yeah, that is cool. And I literally said what I just said. I'm like, why would I need a gaffer?
Yeah.
And then you go
From the back seat.
You go, yeah, we don't need a gaffer. Our audio was fine.
Yeah.
And then Caleb and I didn't say anything.
It got silent in the car.
Yeah.
And the silent where I went, and then like maybe a half to 2 seconds later, I went, a gaffer doesn't have to do with audio, does it? And I'm like, I messed up. I know I messed up.
I don't know.
The silence
They
was
might, they might help with like grounding
the
and cables.
silence
Get
was
into grips
deafening.
and
I was
stuff.
like, wait a second.
Well, it was funny. It was funny. Yeah. And my favorite part about that was you just said it with complete confidence.
Yeah.
You're just like, yeah, we don't need a gaffer. Our audio was great.
Yeah.
And then Caleb and I were just like, let's let him have this one.
Yeah. Who's poor boy?
Who's going to tell him? Who's going to break it to him?
But I broke it to myself. I was like, oh, I just messed up. I don't know.
It's okay.
What is a gaffer? I don't even remember.
Well, so if we're getting into gaffers and grips, like you mainly get into like lighting, electrical,
Okay.
things like that, right?
Okay.
So,
Who's the guy that builds the cameras?
well, so that's a whole, are you talking about like on a big film?
Sure.
Okay, so like building cameras out, you have like your director of photography, right?
Okay.
But then the builds usually come from like first and second AC,
Okay.
right? Which is like your assistant camera.
Okay.
And like there's first AC, which mostly what happens is they pull focus.
Okay.
And then second AC will typically swap lenses out and do builds, but they're a crew.
Sure.
You know, like good DPs will help get
They
in the
do it
trenches
all.
with their
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if I was on a set and a director of photography was like, you know, get me this and this and this, go build this. And he's just like standing there. I'd be like, dude, you suck. I don't want to hang out with you. But it's like, I don't need that.
Yeah.
Right. Because the thing is like, again, I'm not working in Hollywood, but like,
Well, you also take a lot of inspiration, and we'll talk about this with Man in the Hat. You take a lot of inspiration from Hitchcock and John Carpenter.
yeah.
And both of those guys man their camera, if I'm remembering correctly.
A lot of times for
Okay.
sure. Yeah. I mean, there's always exceptions,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You know, like, there's plenty of films like, Halloween had a director of photography.
Sure,
It
sure.
had, So
Yeah. But on these small films,
why do I need it?
Yeah, you've got the talent and the expertise to do it, and that's part of what makes it fun, getting to do the things that you like to do.
Well, and the thing is like, I don't know. I've had a couple of friends say, "Oh, so you're a control freak." A little bit. And I'll admit that right here and now.
Yeah.
Let's just get that out of the way.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, you're also the only person on our team, right? Not only for Watch Me, but also for Man in the Hat, which we'll talk about. You're also the only person that at least I think in those groups has the attention to detail and like the willingness to put in the necessary hours to do those things.
Sure.
Because I'm not built for that, right? I'm not built for the editing, right? Because you're making these micro adjustments to color or to sound that I can't perceive.
Yeah, I'll like I'll send him a color grade like test, and then I'll send him another one, and I'm like, doesn't this look better? And he's like, they look the same.
They look the same to me.
And they
right?
don't. Yeah, it's just like, I'm like, no, and then I'll explain it. But
yeah, I can tell the difference between the raw footage and the very final one, and maybe the one in the middle.
Sure.
But those micro adjustments that happen in between each one before the final, I can't see that. And you can.
I am a little bit of a control freak where from start to finish, if I have like, I don't want to sound like a jerk and say a vision, but if like I have an idea of something that I really want to do with all my heart, like I struggle to delegate things to other people. Like that's a confession. And it's not just that, like my old bandmates and all my bands will agree. They're like, well, Dylan wanted to track bass on the album and guitars. And he also wanted to do this and this and this. And it sucks because sometimes people feel like they're not able to express themselves creatively. And I take full accountability for that. And it's not a trait that I'm not working on either. I'm not just like, hey, tough stuff. Like, you're not going to be able to do this. I'm doing everything. It's just like, it's a trait that I'm working on. But for the time being, I love manning my own camera. I love directing. I love editing and a billion other things on set. You know, it's just like, it's especially when it's something that I adore, something that I feel strongly about.
Because the concept that we came up with for Watch Me, and once we wrote it, we're like, yo, we're into this. This is going to be fun.
And we went and did it, right? And there was no kinks. Like there was no, I mean, other than like the preliminary stuff, when we got into shooting the film, it was like we were in it and it was fun.
Yeah.
Right.
But like, you know, we didn't know what the hotel room was going to look like. We didn't know what the layout was.
We did no scouting.
So we couldn't do any storyboarding or anything beforehand. We just had like the words on paper and our imagination. And then once we got there, we're like, okay, maybe it can go right here, 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 and here. We were moving furniture around. So even though we like got there at maybe 3 p.m, we definitely didn't start filming until close to 5 or 6.
Like in situations where you don't storyboard kids.
Yeah. And
when you
scout
don't
the location, like figure out what the lighting is going to be.
Yeah, really put in that time. But like if you're stressed for time, like sometimes I do corporate gigs where I don't have time to storyboard, right? And you do what's called shooting coverage. It's where I'll shoot a billion angles of the same thing. That way I have choices later.
Which we did for Watch Me.
Watch Me was totally coverage, right?
There was even story beats that weren't technically coverage, but like we had written it in there, didn't know if it was necessary, filmed it anyway. And then, because there's a story beat right in the middle that I know we debated on. And we finally said, let's just film it. Maybe it doesn't make it in there.
Yeah.
Right. And it ended up making it, and it made the difference. Right.
Totally did.
And we're glad that we erred on the side of let's just shoot it.
Definitely. Like there are like my boss, I'm going to say she's very against overshooting. You know, when I went to Tampa recently, just a few weeks ago, and I was shooting a corporate video, and I'm so used to overshooting that I got back to my hotel and I called her and I'm like, I feel like garbage. And she's like, why? I'm like, I don't think I got enough. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I shot the storyboard. Like I had my shot list and I got all that stuff. She's like, then you're good. And I know she's right. And I know that. But like, I'm so used to shooting coverage that if I don't overshoot sometimes, I feel like I made a huge mistake. So like, I'm a habitual overshooter. I overshoot everything.
It's also kind of a luxury that we have as short filmmakers, as small crew.
And also having digital cameras.
Yeah. Because overshooting isn't the difference between an extra $1 million in the budget. You know what I mean? Like overshooting is just more tiredness and more time in our day, you know?
Even on bigger productions, like it's I love working with people that are passionate and believe in the project, because realistically what ends up happening is that you have people that are willing to put in that extra time. You know, in our last film, we had a dude sleeping on a freaking bench. You know, we hear him snoring while we're filming. It's like people are there and they're into it and they're ready to go. I mean, obviously when you get into like, I don't know, when you get into unions and stuff, you got to be careful. You got to
Totally.
treat actors like, hey, you're in and out at these times. Yeah. But realistically, like when we're making shorts, like you said, we don't have to worry about things like that, right?
And that's one of those things that, like, I know this isn't supposed to be like a filmmaking podcast for filmmakers, but if you're listening and you want to make a short film, take advantage of some of those luxuries that you have.
Take advantage of your friends.
Yeah. I mean, take advantage of like your resource that you have to spend is time. And if you're passionate about it, it won't feel like you're like wasting your time.
Because you're not. Yeah. I mean, like some people look at it as like, you know, time equals money. And like, sure. Yeah. Like where people want to be compensated for all of their time. And I respect that. But like, I don't know, fun is compensation. Pride is compensation. Having something you like make and you're stoked on is compensation. So yeah, having like a group of people that are willing to stick it out and go the extra mile and still smile about it. Yeah. That's where it's at, dude.
Because when we hit 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, those filming days, all three of us were like, I think all three of us had at least a subconscious deal where we're like, we could probably phone it in and be okay at this point.
Yeah.
But we didn't.
No.
You know, we wanted it to be dope.
No.
So we like made the conscious decision to push it.
Yeah.
And get it good, which made the difference. It was a ton of fun too. So
absolutely. Yeah. So reception was really good. We didn't take home many awards that night, which I love because it is such a good test and a check of ego. Yeah. Like I look at life, like life tests me constantly. Yeah. And when I feel like I'm starting to get entitled, I don't win anything and it's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, stop that. You know, so it's like I didn't feel entitled on Watch Me, but I felt pretty confident. And I was like, oh, this is sick. People really like it. Yeah. Judges didn't give us anything, and that's totally okay because it does two things. One, it obviously tests us and checks our ego. But two, it like, I don't know, it like puts us into the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is filmmaking.
Yeah.
And the bigger picture is spending time with your friends.
Totally.
And it has nothing to do with, you know, that praise or those accolades or whatever. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Right. And losing is the best way to get put back into reality. And reality is you're doing something you love. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
As an analogy, I don't know. So my dad, he boxed when he was younger. Has he ever told you about boxing?
Oh yeah.
And so my dad, got hired a lot by these certain gyms to be what's called like a hitman. And what it is when you have a young boxer who's strung a bunch of wins together, they'll bring in someone who's severely more experienced than this person to beat them up really badly to see if they're going to quit or not. Because you have these young hotshots, right, who string 5 or 6 wins together, they're undefeated. And sometimes they hit that first loss and they give up. They're not in it anymore. You know what I mean? So it's like, better to get that loss in early than way down the line before you know, invest a bunch of stuff that's not going to pan out. Right. So it's funny that you say you're stoked that we didn't win. Cause you're right. Like we had to, afterward, we're like, dang, we're really stoked about it. But then we watched it and we're like, we are still stoked about it. Cause we really enjoyed it. Yeah. We enjoyed the process of it. We enjoyed the final product. So awards or no awards, this was dope. We're really excited about this.
So, do you have any closing statements on episode uno of the Very Refreshing Podcast, Alek?
I'm just really excited that we're doing this. This first episode has been a lot of fun. It's kind of fun to reminisce about, you know, making that movie that we worked on. And I'm excited for the next episode because, the next episode, we're going to talk about the next movie that we made together, which was even bigger. It was definitely a different kind of project, brought in some new people. I think we had some things to learn from the first one that we made into the second one. So, and it's also a product that I'm really, really proud of, the next movie that we made. So I'm really excited to be able to talk about that one and reminisce about that experience as well.
Yeah. Yeah. The movie is Watch Me. It's on YouTube. You can go to youtube.com, type in Watch Me, disturbing horror short film, Watch Me horror short film. You could type my name, Dylan Hamer. It'll come up as well. Yeah, so episode 2 is right around the corner, and we are going to talk about where we actually did need gaffers and grips. And we did sort of utilize and pull from other people's skill sets that we didn't utilize this time. But yeah, I'm just so thankful that everyone's listening, and hopefully you guys stick with us for the long haul. We have 11 episodes to go.
Yeah, we do. It's going to be exciting. We're going to get into a lot of fun stuff. I'm excited about it.
It's going to be a trick. Thank you so much for listening, guys. We will see you next time on the Very Refreshing Podcast.
See you, everybody.
Thank you for checking out the Very Refreshing Podcast. Subscribe for more content just like this.